In just a few days, business and government leaders will be coming together for the start of APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum in San Francisco. CEOs, entrepreneurs, world leaders, they'll all be there. 21 member economies from the Pacific Rim will be there as well, including President Biden and Chinese President Xi. The theme of this year's CEO Summit is creating economic opportunity in the Asia-Pacific region. More than 1,000 business and government leaders are expected to attend in person. Now, the APEC has come a long way since its founding over 30 years ago. Dan Williams explains.
San Francisco is set to host one of the most important gatherings of global leaders this year. APEC, or the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, brings together some 20,000 people, including heads of state and dignitaries from 21 member economies from Asia, the Pacific, North America and South America. Its goal is to support sustainable economic growth and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region, and it has come a long way since it was established more than 30 years ago.
It is one of the largest multilateral trade organizations in the entire world. And when you look at the significance of APEC in terms of their size, almost 2/3 of global trade is conducted within this body. This is quite a remarkable sort of story of growth, growing from around 19 trillion to the current $53 trillion in total trade volume.
APEC was founded in 1989 with 12 members, including the US, Australia, Japan and Malaysia. China joined 2 years later. Peru, Russia and Vietnam were the last countries to sign on to APEC in 1998.
The goal of APEC really had been to provide a platform where there would be no hard binding rules, but there would be peer pressure to do concerted liberalization by each of these countries on a timeline that they were comfortable with. And as certain countries saw others race ahead, do better through trade liberalization, the others also chose that path.
A significant factor in APEC's growth since 1991 has been China's rapid development. In 1991, China's GDP was less than $400 billion. Today, it is nearly $18 trillion.
Well, China's role has been enormous, and this was a pivotal period in China's opening and reform period, where China really started to accelerate its opening up to the rest of the world. China is a very important trade partner and a very important member, and disproportionately also as a part of this trade body.
The APEC economies already account for some 60% of global GDP. And with economic growth in Asia and the Pacific projected to accelerate from 3.9% last year to 4.6% this year, APEC's importance is only expected to increase.
This is an organization that's, at the right time and at the right place. GDP is growing at a level that's greater than other parts of the world. So all those things taken into consideration make APEC and the APEC member region a very important region and driver of future global growth.
The spotlight might be on San Francisco now, but APEC's significant growth since it began opens the potential for its future to be even brighter. Dan Williams, CGTN, Chicago.
For more on the big APEC meeting and what to expect, Arthur Dong, who you just saw in that story, a professor at the McDonough School of Business, Georgetown University, right here in D.C. Good to see you again, Arthur.
Thank you, Phil. Always great to be with you.
I can't help but notice 6 months ago, China and the U.S. wanted to rip each other's heads off. And every month since then, there's been some meetings, there's been some visits by different folks back and forth. And it feels like this relationship has gotten much more positive. But at the same time, that means our expectations continue to rise as well. What are our expectations now?
Yeah, I think we should all temper our expectations, but all of these have been baby steps moving forward as both countries, reposture themselves from a position of confrontation towards a position of conciliation. And so we should all appreciate the fact that any small gestures and small steps are all steps in the right direction. And I think it's encouraging, and certainly the markets are encouraged by what they see. And all eyes will be focused next week on the meeting or the supposed meeting between President Xi and President Biden.
Yeah, I mean, look, the skeptic in me knows that with these big events, and while they're not political, they also are political, that both sides want to have a good public relations sort of agenda to it. And I hope that after these meetings take place, there's sort of concrete and sustainable work to be done between the two. What do you think led to this recent good communications, and will it last?
I would say that there's a sort of general observation that, the world in many respects are in a sense falling apart. And so both economically and now geostrategically, as well as conflict around the world, is creating great disturbances, around the world. And the United States certainly is appreciative of the fact that there has to be, in some way, the sort of gathering of global powers, United States and China included, to try to find a way to get together in some way and resume a dialogue to try to, again, lower the temperature of some of these events that are occurring all over the world. And many of these events cannot be, in a sense, dealt with without the involvement of both the United States and China.
Yeah, and you and I have spoken before. Politically, we are two very different countries, right? Culturally, we are different on many levels, but economically, we are very much tied together. This isn't a new story, but what I'm curious is that this economic tie that we have together, it means a lot more than just China-U.S. relations. It really is about the world, right? If this relationship is healthy, the world will do better. If this relationship gets sick, the world likely would do worse.
Without a doubt, the world's two largest economies collectively, when you think about the trillions of dollars of global GDP that both nations contribute, they are both important sources of both global demand and global supply. And any interruption of that will spell dire consequences for many parts of the world, both developed and undeveloped. And so it's a very important relationship. And I think with cooler heads prevailing, getting to the table and having the right and responsible parties having discussions either behind the scenes to try to, understand each side's position and try to work through via compromise some of the most hardened positions may lead to some important advances and breakthroughs moving forward.
I mean, and I don't want to, I'm not pushing back on this, but the two sides know each other very well. China knows exactly where the U.S. stands and vice versa. And that leads me to, what does China hope to accomplish, you think, at the end of next week? Is it deals? Is it positive PR with CEOs of major companies whom there are meetings that are already set up? Is it foreign direct investment into China? What is ultimately the goal of the Chinese?
I think for China to try to send an important message to the rest of the world, to both American investors and American companies, that China is both a safe as well as a very important market, for which China is going to ensure that their investments in the Chinese marketplace will be protected. So there has been a disturbance in terms of confidence on the part of Western companies. And I think the message that China wants to articulate is that foreign companies and foreign investors should have no fear about China's future prospects, and that the Chinese government will do everything it can to both reassure and instill confidence that China is open for business and that it still has a long way in terms of its growth trajectory.
The flip side of that is what the U.S. is looking at, and maybe shifts slightly away from just the economy, but politically, the U.S., if you talk about Ukraine, we'd like China's cooperation, right? If you talk about what's happening in Israel, U.S. politicians would like cooperation from China, or at least assistance. You can't ignore the fact that there is a political need from the U.S. to have China and the U.S. truly work together on some of these issues.
Phil, I completely agree. All these matters and issues are intertwined, and you can't have, again, discussions about security unless you also have discussions about the global economic order. And I completely agree with you that a sophisticated view of the world situation must involve open discussions about both economy as well as security.